Welcome back to another episode of the North Star Takes podcast. I'm Bailey Paulicki. He's Jacob Liberta there in the middle. And of course, with this, late Rudy Gobert news, we had to bring in our hardcore Timberwolves fan, Jackson LaFave, to give his thoughts on the trade and what it means going forward for this squad. So let's jump right into it, guys. The Timberwolves got Rudy Gobert from the Utah Jazz, and they gave up a massive haul. They gave up Malik Beasley, Patrick Beverly, Jared Vanderbilt, Leandro Bolmero, and a slew of first-round draft picks starting in 2023, I believe, and alternating every other year with some protections thrown in there as well. And I think there's even a pick swap in like 2026 or something. So I mean, just a outrageously huge trade for just between two teams, as far as we know. I don't think there's been any information coming out that this is a more than a two-team deal. So, what were your guys' initial thoughts? Maybe we'll start with Jackson here, our guest, and see what his initial thoughts were on just when he heard the news break about the Wolves getting Rudy Gobert.
Well, I couldn't believe it. I was shocked. I heard some rumblings on Twitter, like Doogie Wolfson was reporting it, that they were talking, to the Jazz about Gobert, but I didn't think it would happen because it's just such a big risk. And I thought they're going to run it back with this team, kind of bank on the ascendance of Ant. But wow, what a massive trade. Probably the biggest trade in franchise history, besides maybe the KG trade, but one of the biggest trades in Minnesota sports history, in my opinion. I couldn't believe it. And initial reaction was just a little bit concerned because we have two centers. We already have our all-star center, Karl-Anthony Towns, and we gave up. I was really sad to see Patrick Beverly go because he's just kind of the leader, heart and soul of the team, and also Vanderbilt. I was sad to go, and I was just kind of confused, excited, and a little bit concerned. But I mean, I've came to process this the past few days, and I couldn't be more excited for the future.
Alberto, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm kind of aligned with Jackson there. I think at first, gut reaction, I was like, oh man, we're trading 9 assets for one dude. But then the more time we gave it to sink in, kind of reflect, and think about it, process everything, what the rotations will look like with all these role players exiting the organization along with those first round draft picks, it felt like this was a really great idea, or a great move, I should say, by Connolly to make a splash in his first offseason as Timberwolves president of basketball operations. I think this feels like a good move as far as basically being different than everybody else. I think going as big as we are, especially it's kind of ironic when you consider where we were last year. We're basically playing as one of the smallest teams in the league. Now we're one of the biggest when you got our projected starting 5 of D'Lo, Ant, then McDaniels, Towns, and Gobert. Like, that's just huge. All these guys with these really long wingspans, just all sorts of length. So it's like this is kind of a flip of the page, I guess, from where we were at, and kind of feels a little bit scary to basically venture away from something we felt like it worked as far as last year went, because we won 46 games, got back to the playoffs, made a little noise. I think we had a great opportunity to win that first round series against the Grizzlies, just came up short, but it was kind of a growing pains thing with a young team like we have. So now to kind of turn into something totally different and bank on Cats being able to play the 4 effectively, I think this is a pretty big jump to make, and I think it's either really going to work or really not, because I think we could be a huge matchup problem for some teams. We have 2 All-NBA centers on our team. Towns is All-NBA third team last year. Gobert has been All-NBA third team 3 times and also second team 1 time in his career, along with being Defensive Player of the Year 3 times, and then also being a 3-time All-Star, 6-time All-Defensive First Team. Like, this guy has all the sorts of accolades to his name. I get it, he's 30, but I think he's still pretty close to his peak, and he's as good as anybody as far as a rim protector goes. And then this will take some heat off Cats really inside. I think taking him out of the paint to hopefully reduce his fouls, and that's a big thing for this Wolves team, to keep Cat on the floor basically and stay out of foul trouble, because that's usually when we fall into some pretty messy situations. It's when Cat's off the floor, and like last year running Nas out there, and it's like just not quite getting it done. Sometimes we got bailed out, like for instance in that play-in game, Ant and D'Lo step up. It's like can't bank on those guys every time Cat gets in foul trouble to drop 30. So realistically, all in all, the more I have time to sit and think about it, I'm pretty excited with where this is going. I can't wait to see what it looks like. Obviously on paper it looks great, but obviously the execution of it all is very important, or more important, I should say. So, Baylor, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I thought it was a very interesting trade because, like Jackson said, there had been rumblings for probably a week or so that they had interest in Gobert, but maybe it wasn't that serious. And then, like the day that it happened, Doogie was reporting that they were still talking with Utah about Gobert. But it's crazy how much stuff changes. Like going into free agency, we were all kind of on board with the DeJounte Murray idea, maybe swapping out D'Lo and some picks to get DeJounte Murray. Atlanta Hawks trade for him, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, having him and Trae Young on the same team. But then it's like, well, what are your options at that point? Well, then all of a sudden, out of Brooklyn, you get the news that, Kevin Durant wants out of Brooklyn. And of course, Kyrie's going to be right behind him wanting out. And it's like, well, you probably don't want to trade for Kyrie Irving. But I mean, Kevin Durant, is there any sort of way the Timberwolves could try to get him? Like, obviously, we're not a preferred destination of his. And I think it's rumored he wants to go to Phoenix or Miami. Of course, some of the better teams in the league. But like, you have that speculation as well because like we have all the flexibility in the world. We hold all our picks, and so there's that slight chance that maybe there could be a Kevin Durant trade. Well, then the Gobert news breaks, and all of a sudden your whole mindset kind of has to change because it's like, well, now I mean, D'Lo's probably staying here because what point guard are we going to get if it's not D'Angelo Russell at this point? So D'Lo's going to be running the show, and like you guys talked about, we're going to have two all NBA centers. And Cat's going to be playing the 4, which we had talked about maybe going into last year, maybe that would happen. And of course it didn't. So it's going to be interesting. And the thing that I'm struggling to come to grips with is just that Gobert's on a max deal. And I get how good of a defensive player he is, but I mean, his offensive skill set isn't the greatest, which it doesn't need to be because, with your projected starting 5, you listed Liberta. I mean, Gobert really isn't going to be the main scorer out of any of those guys. So it's like, McDaniel's volume should go up this year. I would anticipate more volume from Ant and D'Lo and Cat because you're losing Beasley, you're losing Pat Bev, guys that brought more of a punch off the bench. But then this also opens up opportunities, which we can get into later on as well, for guys like Jalen Noel. Taurean Prince will probably have a little bigger role this year than he did last year. They signed Kyle Anderson, who's just a solid depth power forward signing. And that when you look at it now, it's like they were totally anticipating losing Vanderbilt with a signing like Kyle Anderson. So, I mean, Connolly, I think he knows what he's doing. This is a huge swing. And there's even talks about how he kind of made like a passing remark about how he regretted passing on Gobert. And I think it was the 2013 draft or something like that. And he was picked a couple picks later by Denver or by Utah. So I think this is kind of a second chance for Connolly to go get the guy that he was maybe coveting at the time, but didn't pull the trigger on. So, let's first talk about the package the Wolves gave up, and then we can kind of talk about the expectations for the team going forward and maybe what the rotation is going to look like. So, Jackson, did you feel that the Timberwolves gave up too much for a guy that isn't really an offensive player?
Well, yeah, of course we gave up too much. I mean, look at all the picks, look at all the players. We gave up too much, clearly, but we had to. So I think we gave up too much, way too much value for Gobert. But since we're the Minnesota Timberwolves, you have to actually give up too much in order to turn this new leaf and get the best defensive player in the NBA. And so I think it was a necessary evil. So I think overall we did. I mean, I'm not too concerned about those picks as well because theoretically we're going to be a top team in the NBA for many years to come. So those are going to be picks in the 20s. Picks are very different from like the NFL where it's more of a crapshoot in the NBA with picks, and it's kind of more developmental guys a lot of times, especially when you get to the 20s. So the picks, I'm not too concerned. The players, I mean, if you go through the list of players we gave up, I mean, we still have our core intact, which is important. So I think just from a pure value standpoint, not knowing the team, not knowing the guys and everything, you can see, just pure value, we gave up too much, but I think it was still the right move. So that's kind of my take on that.
How about you, Liberta?
Yeah, I like what Jackson had to say, and really adding on to that, I guess it's purely like as far as quantity standpoint, it's a lot, and then consider how all these guys fit on our team. Like I was a little sad to lose Beasley, I should say, and that's strictly because this guy's one of the better three-point shooters in the NBA. I think he was top 5 last year in three-point makes. So obviously that is substantial on its own, but it made me feel a little bit better that we softened that by signing Bryn Forbes to a very economical contract. And I think he's going to fill that role that we need just fine. And then considering Vando, I think he was a fun, high-energy guy, and I'm sad to lose him, but at the same time, I don't know if he's like a starting 4 on a championship team, and even if he's coming off the bench, I guess, I don't know, especially when you sign Kyle Anderson. So that maybe he didn't quite fit on this team like really it was envisioned for maybe previously before Connolly got here. And then Connolly trading, speaking of those two, Connolly trading those two for a second time immediately within his first month on the job. So
yeah, those guys probably hate Tim Connolly.
I know, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm on the move. But and then you got Pat Bev. I think he's more importantly than anything is really just his honestly his personality and his leadership in the locker room. I think that'll hurt a little bit, but hopefully within the year he spent here, that rubbed off enough on these guys where they can take it from here. So I'm a little sad to see him go, but at the same time, as far as from a basketball standpoint, I'm pretty happy that some of these other guys can get more opportunities. Like, for instance, you got D'Lo and Ant who should start, and that's also going to open it up for McDaniels start 3, unlike last year. And then you consider the bench roles. I like having J-Mac going out there and playing with pace, and then get Jalen Noel an expanded role, really, I think that he deserves. So I think I can live with that more too, that Pat Bev's gone, especially when he's aging and he doesn't play like a ton of games to begin with or can't handle a ton of minutes. So
yeah,
I can rationalize basically moving off all these players. And then certainly Kessler, I have no attachment to. We just drafted him. So that's kind of whatever. And then Bomero, no, I don't really care either. So as far as future draft picks, like Jackson said, 2023, 2025 especially, I don't really care. We should be good in those seasons where those picks should be probably, hopefully late 20s. So then it's like, what kind of player are you really going to get there? So I'm pretty satisfied. Again, one of those things. As more time goes on, then I feel better about it as I look back on it. I don't know. Well, how you feeling, Bailey?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I mean, initial reaction, I'm like, this is way too much to give up for Rudy Gobert. I'm like, this could be like, a legit superstar type trade. But at the same time, we didn't include any studs. And obviously the price gets jacked up if you're not going to include Jaden McDaniels. So it's like, I mean, I don't know. I like Beasley. He was going to be gone probably within the next season anyways. Vanderbilt, it kind of looked like he had a long-term future with the team, but at the same time, you get Gobert in, and now you have positional flexibility with Cat. Naz Reid also has positional flexibility, I think. So, you'll see some mixing and matching still with Naz Reid playing with Cat and maybe with Gobert. So that intrigues me as well. And Pat Bev, he was fantastic for this team. He was a great leader. He established a culture here, held players accountable, ratcheted up the defensive intensity by a mile. But like you said, hopefully, guys were able to learn enough from him in 1 year that they're able to hold themselves accountable. Hopefully this really rubbed off on Ant and McDaniels. And they still have Taurean Prince there from other things I've seen. Taurean Prince was more of a leader than people maybe had thought. He kind of helped, with Pat Bev to bring these young guys along. So really, I think the ones that really need to be held accountable are Cat and D'Lo, because they're kind of at that stage now where they are the vets. Like, they need to kind of start leading this team and putting their fingerprints all over it, really. So, but I guess the one thing is it did clear up some, roster crunch issues that were there. Like you said, Jalen Noel is definitely going to get more of an opportunity now where, his future was looking bleak as much as a week ago. We didn't really know what the future of him would be on this team. And he's obviously a very promising player who can create his own shot, get to the basket. He's literally a walking bucket. I mean, a lot of people think if you had to have a shot at the end of the game, you'd almost maybe give it to him just because he's going to give himself an open look. And I mean, he's been a baller, and in the limited opportunities he's gotten, he's been a baller. So, yeah, like Jackson said, we gave up too much because we are the Timberwolves, and you have to give up too much to get a player of that caliber. But at the same time, it's like, is it really going to affect us? Are we going to look back at this, 4 or 5 years from now and be like, man, I really wish we would have kept Pat Bev and Vando and Beasley and all those first-round picks? Because theoretically, like Jackson said, you should be good enough where you're not going to need those first-round picks anyways. And you still have every other year. So every other year you can kind of supplement, the depth on your team. And then, those players, Pat Bev will be out of the league, I'm sure, within the next few years. Beasley, he's been great, but he's also so volatile that I could just kind of see him falling off over the next couple of years too, to where he just kind of bounces around from team to team. So I don't know. I don't feel too horrible about it. It's just, I guess Gobert's not the most exciting player in the world, but it completely changes the complexion of this team from being one of the smallest teams that couldn't rebound to now they're going to be a team that maybe struggles to match up with the small ball teams. And that'll be interesting to see how Chris Finch kind of diagnoses that. And that'll be my last point before we move on to the next subject is in Chris Finch we trust, because I think if anybody can figure this whole thing out, it's going to be Chris Finch. So, all right, let's get into our expectations for the team, and we can maybe talk about the rotation as well. Jackson, I'm excited to start with you here because I know your expectations are probably going to be sky high for this squad now. What are your thoughts? How far do you think they can push it now, improving off of last year?
So I was up, on 4th of July weekend, talking to my cousins about this, and they were laughing at me for saying this, but you have to look at this team, you have to look at this roster, and it sounds crazy, but like we should be favorites to win the NBA Finals next season. It sounds crazy, but look at the team. Look at the roster. If everything works, obviously. That's of course the most important. We don't know if Cat is going to work at the 4. I love that he's going to be shooting more shots. Like hopefully we can kind of transition more to his 2018 self where he's taken, 7-8 threes a game. Whereas last year he was our main big man. He wasn't really taking many threes, and that's one of his strengths. Mm-hmm. So I think he's going to work okay. And it's just going to be a completely different team, really. Obviously the same guys, but our whole defensive scheme was to do the high wall and to have Cat come up and not really guard the rim at all, and be running around scrambling on defense with our small guys. Now we're just going to run the drop where Rudy Gobert is just going to kind of roam around and swat things away, and Cat is not going to have to get in all this foul trouble, hopefully. But again, everything needs to work okay. But just look on paper. We have D'Angelo Russell, who I think it's going to be kind of sneaky how we have Rudy Gobert now, because I think that unlocks a lot of D'Lo's game. Because I look at Brooklyn when he was throwing lobs at Jared Allen, and during his his one All-Star year with Brooklyn, he's a facilitator, he's a playmaker guy, and having Rudy Gobert doing pick and roll with Cat, kind of on the wing, or kind of Cat down low as well. Yeah. Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, we're going to lock a lot of him. I think we haven't even really, with this Rudy Gobert situation, we haven't even really talked about the potential ascension of Ant. Usually year 3 with these superstar guys, you see a big ascension. Look at 2006 D Wade when the Heat won the NBA Finals in that season. I think as Minnesota, my last kind of point is as Minnesota fans, I think we're just ingrained to where, I was kind of just, hey, we got Kyle Anderson, let's run it back. Let's kind of bank on the ascension of Ant. And I'm excited, but let's play it safe, conservative, run it back. You can't do that, and especially it seems like it's always seemed like we were trying to ride the wave of Gerson, when we brought in Gerson Rosas. We're trying to capture, the initial when he was on the Houston Rockets when they were running small ball. They had PJ Tucker as a center, and we were trying to capture that and try to, but that wasn't. They started that in 2012, 2013. And you look at the Warriors. We don't have Steph Curry on our team. We're not. If we're going to try to out small ball the Warriors, we're not. So right. I love the idea of, instead of trying to ride the wave and catch it, being the first team to this new strategy and letting the wave run into us, Right. So I love that idea. And so, man, I'm excited. I think we should win 60 games the next season. I don't see who we have the best starting 5 on paper in the league, in my opinion. And we should be, contenders for the NBA Finals.
Alberto, what do you think about that?
I'm here for Jackson's optimism. Inject this in my veins. I'm so pumped for this next Wolf season, but I don't know if I can reach those levels yet. I think at this point I got to temper my expectations a little bit. And I feel like 50 feels like a reasonable bar, considering 146 last year with the team we had, and now with a theoretically improved starting 5 and guys with really experience at going through a season of winning, basically, that we hadn't had in basically most of these guys' careers. I think that's a huge thing to have. So really, I'd probably set it 50 wins, and truthfully, it could be better. Like Jack said, this situation could be fantastic for D'Lo, getting Gobert in here, just because I think Gobert is one of the best rollers in the NBA. I don't think that's really part of Cat's game. So realistically, I think this will be better for him, and especially in a contract year, and especially coming off the worst shooting season of his career, it feels like everything should get a little bit better. So it kind of feels like this perfect recipe for him to basically ball out and want to cash in next offseason and get a huge contract, at least, whether it be from us or somebody. So I think that's also very important. And if D'Lo is really good, I fully anticipate Ant, McDaniels, the future cornerstones of the franchise, plus Cat, who all-NBA player if he keeps on doing his thing, and then Gobert being the presence that he is inside. I think Jackson's levels are attainable here. I think it's possible if all the cards fall right. I think we're definitely trending the right direction in a big way. So I'm extremely fascinated to see how this really will fit, I guess, once we see them all on the court together and playing for a substantial amount of time, albeit everything kind of hinges on injuries and things like that, like with any team in any season. But I think with this starting five is currently constructed, it's like Jackson said, I think it's up there. It's one of the best. And to do it the way we're doing it, as far as some teams haven't really seen before, with 2 all-NBA centers in your starting five, I think that's going to be a wrinkle that most teams won't be able to defend, at least right away. So maybe this could take us all the way. Who knows? Like Jackson said, we don't have one of the best shooters of all time. So it's kind of hard to out small ball that. So going in this direction feels like the right move, or at least feels like a risk worth taking. Whether, I guess, down the road it looks like it was the right decision or not. I admire the really the gutsiness to go after this and see what happens. I think this is a big splash that I think Laurie, A-Rod, Connolly were all looking to make. And I think it's also very important that everybody signed off on this, that they were good bringing a Gobert in here, from ownership to obviously Connolly, and then Finch, and then Cat too, playing next to him, moving into a new position that he hasn't played the rest of his career. So I'm pretty excited, and I think this team should have some sky-high expectations.
Yeah, I agree. I would say 50 wins hopefully is the floor for this team. I'm not willing to go to 60 just because I think the Phoenix Suns were the only team to win 60 games this year, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, you have to be like clear-cut almost the best team in the NBA to win 60 games. But I see the West becoming more challenging yet. I mean, if Kevin Durant ends up in Phoenix, yeah, they'll probably give up like DeAndre Ayton and, a few role players. But like Durant, Booker, Chris Paul, like that'd be a really nice trio. The Clippers are going to be back and healthy this year with Kawhi and Paul George. Denver's getting Jamal Murray back, maybe Michael Porter Jr. as well. The Jazz are going to fall off, I would imagine. It's going to be Donovan Mitchell and a bunch of role guys. So unless maybe they make some sort of move here too, but I have a hard time seeing that at this point. So, I mean, there's going to be some, Memphis is still going to be good. Dallas is on the rise as well. We saw that. They made the Western Conference Finals. But can the Wolves ascend above those teams just based on the moves they've made here? I mean, nobody's really unbeatable. Like, I felt like Golden State wasn't unbeatable this year. I think they kind of got lucky. Phoenix got bounced. And then they ended up playing really well down the stretch in the finals. But like, I'm not scared of Golden State next year. I'm not scared of Phoenix unless maybe they get Kevin Durant. So it's like, I think the Wolves could and probably should be a top 4 seed in the West next season and have home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs. The problem is, if you're the 4 seed and you play the 5 could easily be Memphis again. It could be Golden State. It could be Dallas. It could be a really good team because that's how deep the West is. But that's why you go and make trades like this, because you're trying to compete with teams that are just constantly making moves like this, trying to get better. And I would bet that Kevin Durant ends up in Phoenix, and that's going to make things a whole lot tougher on the entire Western Conference. But to your point, Liberta, a lot of this depends on injuries. Like, I hope Ant's knee situation from this past season is kind of cleaned up. Hopefully they know how to treat that. Hopefully it doesn't flare up again, because that's kind of a scary deal. I mean, he looks like he's in extreme pain one moment, and then, he comes back 5 minutes later, but it's like he doesn't have the same lift. He can't quite explode to the rim as much. So it's like, I mean, if that kind of stuff is hampering his game, obviously that, that might stunt his growth a little bit. But yeah, it's going to come down to the offense of D'Lo, Ant, and Cat. I mean, their volume should go up. I would hope all of them increase their points per game this year. Although Cat's was pretty good last year. Wasn't he around 23, 24 points a game?
I think, yeah, he's pushing 25, I thought. But
yeah, so.
Yeah, I hope D'Lo's goes down, actually. Like, he should just be increased assists, decreased points per game, I think.
Yeah, because D'Lo was around 18, so I'd be fine with him staying around there. But yeah, if he went down and added another assist or two per game, and then McDaniels, I think his scoring needs to go up as well. I think he was right around 10 or 11 points per game last year. I think it needs to be up around 12 to 13, maybe even pushing 15. But yeah, it's going to be exciting. I mean, the defense I have full faith in now with Gobert there, Kyle Anderson off the bench. I mean, Anderson and Gobert is such a massive improvement from Vando, Naz Reid. I'm trying to think, like Nate Knight.
Cat.
Yeah, like, I mean, Cat's, your third. He's not your third, I guess, but like, I mean, in terms of defense, he's probably your third best big on the roster. So it's like, and then Kyle Anderson's also a ball handler, something Vanderbilt couldn't do. So it's like, I mean, it's going to be a completely different dynamic. And then the bench alone, I mean, you'll still have McLaughlin, but then you'll have Noel, Taurean Prince, Anderson, as we mentioned, Naz Reid sticking around, and then Brid Forbes. I mean, that's still 11 deep right there. And, Nathan Knight might still be on the team. So it's like, I mean, you could still run 11, 12 guys deep if you need to. So you still have some depth if injuries do occur. But any other final thoughts from you guys before we take off here? This has been some really good Timberwolves discussion.
No, I mean, I'm just excited. I might buy season tickets next year. Who knows? I mean, just ride the wave, baby. Actually, or we're not. I guess we're not riding the wave. We're, like I mentioned, we're waiting for the wave to hit us, which I love. So, man, this is gonna be excited. We're kind of in uncharted waters as Minnesota sports fans, as having a real contender. So let's just enjoy it and have a good time.
Amen. Roberto, what do you think?
Yeah, like Jackson said, it feels like we're trendsetters, so that's exciting. And I think coming off a season where we made a lot of progress, let's just keep building on to it. I think if you stay the same and get complacent, I think that's where you can kind of plateau or even decline. So I think it's important to get back to at least where we were before. If not, I hope at this point now better. And then to put a bow on this whole Gobert trade discussion, I guess, kind of circling back to a point you made, Bailey, that I think people got to look at this from a stance too, where we didn't give up our 4 best players. So I think that's huge to get a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, especially still a guy that's not like aged out, like he's still in the prime of his career. So, or at least I think he is. So it remains to be seen, I guess, for sure. But basically, yeah, not give up your 4 best players and still acquire him for a bunch of role players and picks. I think that's a really good way of looking at it.
Yeah, it's crazy to see the Minnesota Timberwolves of all teams making moves like this. I mean, they easily have the most promise of any of the 4 major sports teams in this state right now. It's crazy times to be a Timberwolves fan, but it's also very exciting. New ownership, new president of basketball operations, still a fairly new head coach. And obviously we got the young up and coming superstar and Ant, and now we got all these pieces around them. It's going to be really exciting, I think. But, I mean, the season couldn't get here soon enough. And that's the exciting thing too, is like, this isn't going to be like a 1-year type, try to make a run at it. I mean, we got Gobert for 4 years. Cat just signed a Supermax. He'll be around for 6 more years. The only one that's up in the air right now is D'Lo. And, depending on the season he has, we might not even care if he's back or not the following year. So definitely will be interesting. But we'll do more Timberwolves conversation as well. And maybe they'll make another move or two yet to bolster the back end of this roster. So that will do it for this edition of the North Star Takes podcast. Please click the like button on this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Feel free to give us a follow on both Twitter and Instagram, and let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think about the Rudy Gobert trade? What do you think about, what this means for the roster going forward, and maybe what your expectations are for the Timberwolves now, knowing what the roster is most likely going to look like going forward. So until next time, thanks for watching.